So, guys, everybody, welcome back to the Because I Can podcast. Really looking forward to this particular episode. We've got a friend of mine. I think I can call you a friend, Richard. A friend of mine, Richard Gerver, who some of you will know for his infamy talking about change and as a former educationalist. And actually, Richard and I met essentially through keynote speaking. It's kind of what we both do for a living. Um, but actually, we sort of our minds came together really talking about young people, schools, resilience, and the foundation. And in fact, I sort of called Richard for help because I found it so frustrating trying to get into schools and trying to talk to young people about the importance of becoming more resilient for the future. But I didn't know where else to go, so I naturally thought I'm just going to pick up the phone to Richard. So I've essentially bulleted him into being on this podcast today. But here he is. So Richard, thank you ever so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Tim. And it just struck me the whole friend introduction thing. I think we are friends, just so you know, but it flashbacks, right? And you'll appreciate this given your previous life. A few years ago, I was doing a gig in Pakistan, and the Prime Minister was on stage of Pakistan was on stage before me, and he was in hot water, which is not unusual for a Prime Minister in Pakistan. And it was a massive education event, and he had been in hot water because 3 or 4 days before it had been discovered that he'd been embezzling money out of the education budget, right? So he'd been going down, you can imagine, 2000.
Not reasonably standard in certain parts of the world.
Exactly, right. So there are 2000 fuming educators listening to the Prime Minister. You know, that vibe that people will know if they've ever been to an event or done what we do. You know the room, he's lost the room, right?
Yeah.
And at that point, I thought, I'm not sure how I get this back, but he made it worse because he then had to introduce me. And he said, now it's my great honor to introduce you to a dear friend of mine, Richard Gerver. Well, you can imagine how that went. I'd never met him before. But anyway, you and I are definitely friends.
Did you lead by saying, thanks very much, Mr. Prime Minister, we're not friends?
Yeah, I did actually say to the audience, I want you all to know now he's gone. I've never met him before. There was a cheer. I won the audience back. We were okay.
Dangerous honesty.
Oh, God.
Which I guess I wanted to talk to you on. We talk all the time, but I wanted to talk to you on the podcast because I wanted other people to hear this because, as I've said to you before, we seem to have created a society at the moment where it's become quite selfish, right? Am I resilient? How do I become more resilient? Where's my handout? I've got problems. What are you doing for me? And I'm obviously not taking away from anybody that needs help and assistance, and they should absolutely get that. But I guess my big thing and where Because I Can came from was really about being a part of your own solution. And I found it increasingly frustrating that to talk about kind of what I would call as critical life skills really it seems to be kind of not acceptable within the school curriculum because it doesn't fit the mold. And I guess I wanted, well, originally when I first spoke to you, to get your sort of take on that. Whether you say it's important, obviously, change is your thing, but also, yeah, you're a former headmaster at the end of the day, and it's. I wanted to say, am I missing the point, or actually, does somebody with your background think that we need to be talking to young people about becoming a part of their own solution and becoming more resilient?
I think it's absolutely core. I don't think it's ever been more important, Tim. And if you actually look at it, the great crass mistake and error that we're seeing, particularly in developed countries and their education policy, is they are living exactly the life of people who end up in real trouble with resilience, because they are mistakenly believing that if we just get better at doing what we've always done, if we just become more efficient, then everything will be okay. You know, what we've got is we're still living in a society where policymakers, particularly around education, are seeing a complex world. They're seeing complex generations of young people coming into education for a whole variety of reasons. You know, technology, the residue of what happened during COVID and lockdowns, the mental health problems that all of those things are bringing to young people. And their view is, well, if we just perfect what we've always done, if we just do what we've always done but more efficiently, things will be okay. So the focus in education policy, particularly in the developed world, has been on, we just need to get more kids more qualified to get them through exams in bigger numbers, because that is because that's always been the answer. And so what's happened is that schools have, and I don't blame schools a lot of the time for this, right, have jettisoned so much of the stuff that really matters, because all of their time, all of that valuable oxygen is being sucked up by having to deliver the syllabus to get kids prepared for exams, tests, acquiring qualifications. And of course, we've ended up in the perfect storm, because we've got school communities now more focused than ever on academic development. And I'm not saying academic, it's not an either or, but that's almost 100% of the focus at just the time young people coming through into the education system are dealing with probably a more complex environment on a growing up level than any generation before them. And so we've kind of hit this perfect storm. And it is why we have got to put resilience at front and center of everything we're doing with our young people.
Yeah, no, but Richard, it's almost as though the feeling I get right from the outside looking in and trying to help is, if we were, obviously we both talk to big corporate businesses, right, on a daily basis. And one of the things I always say to people is, don't try and lead with your KPIs, your key performance indicators, right? All they are is they're the stopwatch. They let you know what's happening, right? That's it. And it seems to me as though education at the moment, and again, I don't think it's the school's fault; it's a product of the system. But it seems to me as though we're kind of leading with the KPIs, and by that, what I mean is the school is being held accountable to the numbers, to the spreadsheet, and I'm absolutely sure that the intention around creating that in the first place was good. It was a way of trying to measure the performance of the school. But what we're not doing is measuring the performance of the young people. And, in the military, we always used to talk about in order to. I'm doing this in order to achieve that. And surely the outcome of education has to be to create people capable of surviving in the world that's coming next, because at the end of the day, that's the reality. So therefore, we need to be, in my view, equipping them with the skills and to bounce and to come back again. And if we don't teach them how to fall over and bounce back up again or keep going, then we're setting them up to a fail at some point.
There's two things to that. You're absolutely right. I always say, when I'm working in the education sector, and particularly with leaders, and particularly leaders who are looking to create vision and values for their schools, trusts, or communities, first question I always ask them is, what do you want your young people to look like as human beings when they leave you? Right? Whether you're a primary school, elementary phase, whether you're secondary, whether you're a college, whether you're a university, what do you want your young people to look like as human beings when they leave you? In other words, could they walk into a college, or could they walk into a job application or interview, and weirdly people would go, oh, you must have been educated at X because of your attitudes, your behaviors, your personality, your preparedness, your resilience, your ability to collaborate, teamwork, problem solve, all of those things, which I can imagine in a way is exactly, and I'm just assuming, exactly the way military training would go about. This is the kind of product, this is what these human beings need to look like when they come through training in order to be able to thrive in a military context. Now, the interesting thing is, within education, we just don't do that. We assume way too much. We assume children will acquire resilience. We assume they will acquire teamwork abilities. We assume they'll be able to problem solve, to be entrepreneurial and collaborative. And you and I both know that while some people may be born with those conditions, some may be lucky enough to, in their private lives, to experience the conditions that help those skills and attributes develop.
Yeah, there's a massive irony, isn't there, that we allow everybody to take every available life hack. We take every available shortcut and make everything as easy as is humanly possible, and then wonder why we sort of don't develop resilience. And actually, the reality is, as we go forwards, if you're leaving school at whatever age, it doesn't matter. You're going to fail, right? That's the reality of it. And some things you're going to win, and sometimes you're going to lose. And occasionally, going forward is going to seem really difficult.
Just to build on that, sorry, Tim, to build on that, one of the things I've always said to educators and students is learning is tough, right? Learning is tough. It has to be. Because the simple, inconvenient truth is you learn nothing new by getting something right. You only ever learn something new from the point of a mistake or the realization you don't know something, you can't do something, right? Which requires you to be able to bounce back. And the problem is that we're seeing, and you and I have both seen it at the corporate end. So at the end of that formal learning journey, right? And you see it in education all the time. What you're finding is people come across a problem or a challenge or something they don't know how to do or can't do, and they think they've failed, they give up, they melt into a kind of a period of self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and they wait for somebody to come and help them sort it out, right? If we're to Can you imagine the learning potential lifelong of people that come through the education system, knowing that at that moment of stress, at that moment of failure, at that moment of challenge, the psychology is, oh my God, this is the moment I am going to evolve and develop. The power of what we could do in terms of unleashing human potential would be immense.
I think I read as one of Matthew Say's books, which I'm probably about to spectacularly misquote. But I think it was Bounce, and but he was sort of saying that they did a study, didn't they? And they looked into and the kids that had been old in their year, and it was about sport actually, but the old in their year at school rarely went on to make national level teams purely because they'd always been the best. So they'd never struggled. They'd never had to train hard. They'd always been bigger or stronger. And I'm obviously sort of sweeping, but therefore, actually, when they were suddenly in that really narrow pool at the top of the pyramid, where everybody trained hard and everybody was of a certain size or power or speed or whatever it is you need, they then kind of really, really struggled. And there was a whole thing as well about, I'm sure it was like younger siblings, and where the younger siblings had essentially had to strive to be faster, stronger, etc., to catch up with their older siblings. Later in life, statistically, more of them made the kind of national team at whatever it was, purely because their entire education in its widest context, they had to struggle to battle to come on. So they'd learned not to quit, and they'd learn to find a way, around the problem, if that makes sense, to enhance their own performance and their own skills. And
exactly right. And I think that. Again, I don't know about you, but we've both in our lives met some pretty extraordinary people with extraordinary journeys and stories to tell. What is almost universal about all of them is that somewhere in their early lives, one reason or another, they have overcome adversity.
Yeah.
Right? And when I look at my life now, I was the eldest of two, born into on surface a very comfortable middle class family. But at a very young age, my parents went through a spectacularly messy divorce. Now, what that did for me was help me calibrate the context of challenge and problem, because I remember even as a child looking at the issues I was facing in school thinking, nah, not being able to do this maths question is not a problem. Being able to survive a crashing row at home as a child and keep my brother together and competent, that is overcoming a problem. And through my life, I've used that context to help me put things into perspective. And I think that we're living it with a generation of young people today who are not getting the experience, insight, or opportunity to contextualize the issues they're dealing with. So I don't want to be crass and kind of superficial about it, but when they look on TikTok at somebody their age who's got more money or a faster car or poutier lips, they immediately, it's like, and I think we've got to help young people contextualize what challenge is and what adversity is.
But I think as well, and what goes hand in hand with that, I think, is we're sort of legislating our way out of all of the problems. So we're handing labels out everywhere. So rather than helping somebody overcome adversity, what we're saying is, you've got this, whatever this may be. And I don't want to name, we all know what I'm talking about. I don't want to name it because the next thing is it'll go mad. But whatever that label might be, whether it's connected to mental health, physical health, whatever it might be. And we go, oh, Richard, you've got this. And what then happens is Richard goes, oh, it's not my fault, I've got this. Now, you may still have that, Richard, actually, but you're going to have that forever. So actually what we've got to do is help you find a way around the problem, not give you an excuse to give up. And my fear at the minute is we're handing out excuses to give up, whereas there's got to be a way for us to kind of unlabel some of this stuff and say, okay, So you're not very good at that, but maybe you are quite good at this. And how do we use that to your strength? And how do we use this to overcome that? Back to this point about sort of being a part of your own solution, rather than going, oh, here's the reason you can't do that. I was in a meeting just before lockdown, and it was fascinating. We were talking about elite level sport, and essentially, elite level sport is not inspiring young people, right? And the reason for that is back to your we were joking about 5K times and the length of a podcast, but is essentially what happens. And I again blanket terms, right? But young people at the moment sit at home and they watch whoever it is do 5 kilometers in 14 minutes or whatever the current world record is, Liz McColgan or whatever, and they go, I could never do that. So rather than sitting there and going, wow, if I trained really hard, if I ate properly, slept properly, don't drink, if I do that, I could. Actually, we're looking at that and we're going, that's too quick for me. I can never do that. So they're not doing it. So ironically, we're not pulling young people through. And my fear is that we're doing the kind of same thing in the education system, where people go, well, that's really difficult. I can't do that. And then what we do is hand them a label. You're this, you're that. Oh, well, there's my perfect excuse then. I'll give up. And that's, it's a knock-on effect. It's just, you use the expression, it's a perfect storm. It's no one factor. It's all of those things coming together. And my biggest fear is just at the one moment when, pick your disaster. Geopolitics at the moment is absolute chaos. I think people don't realise potentially how dangerous not being sufficient with their own food production is with what's happening across Europe at the moment in places like Ukraine. You've got climate change, but literally pick your disaster. All of those things are going to require the next generation and the generations that follow to be super resilient and be upskilled. And my fear is that we're robbing them of the opportunity to do that.
I think you're absolutely right. And it goes back to something I said before, which is not just that, but we're also teaching them wrongly that as long as they do more of what they've always done or what we've always done, somehow it'll work out in the end. We've got to create generations of people that have the courage to challenge, to question, to do new stuff. There's a few years ago, I interviewed an amazing man called Barry Barish, who was the 2017 Nobel Prize winner for physics. And I said to him, what were you looking for in the people that you brought into? Because I'd never met a Nobel Prize winning scientist before. I said, how did you get together a team of people that went on to shatter a paradigm and create, what you created? He said, Richard, it's one of the most powerful, potent, beautiful, provocative things I've ever heard anyone say. He said, Richard, what I was looking for were people that had the courage to challenge the beauty of the proof. So how do we create generations of young people that have the courage to challenge the beauty of the proof? Because what we can't do is have them sat there going, yeah, the climate's in trouble.
Yeah.
What I'll do is build myself a house on a higher hill. What we've got to do is get people to go, no, this is hard graft, and it's going to require chat, and it's going to require us out of our comfort zone, and it's going to require us to do things differently, and our searching and challenging questions. And I think in a way, the problem with education always has been and continues to be, it's kind of a compliance culture in terms of, this is the set knowledge, this is what you need to know, this is how you need to know it, prove to me when you've got it and I'll reward you for it. So then what happens is we create a culture of people who basically rely on somebody who is more hierarchically senior, older, superior, has higher level qualifications, whatever it might be. And so we live in that culture where people go, whatever label you put on me, whatever descriptor you give me, there'll be somebody somewhere who will come along and tell me what to do and how to do it. And actually, we can't live that way anymore. We can't, let alone future generations. And we have got to create generations of people that think for themselves, challenge, understand the power of curiosity and learning, and realize that it's only in that moment of failure or adversity that you are about to discover something new about yourself, about the people around you, or about the world you live in.
And that's absolutely where my point around selfishness picks up. Because actually we do that as a team. Because for me, resilience is a team sport. It always has been. And it's about enabling resilience in other people. So that actually when we're studying together, when we're working stuff out together, when you get it wrong and can't see the answer and I help, and then the following day when that's the other way around. And we just don't seem to be working together as a pack or a team. And our educational system doesn't seem to be kind of I've got this thing about tribe. People, we're pack animals. We need to be part of a tribe, and we are so much more effective,
Mm.
kind of together. And even at work at the minute, it's fascinating. There was instantly a day. I'll be careful how I explain it, but essentially, somebody fairly new to the workplace said, "I'm not going to finish this piece of work because I want to go to the gym at 6 o'clock. So I'll do it when I get home later at 9 o'clock." And on the surface, you think, well, that's okay. That's modern hybrid working systems. No problem. Happy with that. But of course, that person hadn't considered the effect of the person who's then got to read it at 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So then when somebody else said, well, actually, that's not brilliant for me because although I'm more senior, I've then got to go on at 9 o'clock tonight so that you can go to the gym at 6 o'clock. And then I'm working at midnight. And I've got two kids as well. It's all very selfish, and we don't seem to be considering the kind of knock-on effect of working together, of looking after each other.
Yeah, and again, you look at, sadly, what's happened in schools. A lot of the work around collaboration has kind of been bled away because we're now in such high stakes scenarios over test results and qualifications. What we're teaching children is that education and learning is a solo pursuit.
Yeah.
So is it any wonder that when they come out of the education system, they regard their lives as a solo pursuit?
Yeah,
We
exactly.
know inherently that because of all of the impact of digital technologies and all that stuff that we've talked about, right? We know inherently that young people are more self-centered than they have been before. But then what we're doing is teaching them that it's like, the old Gordon Gekko thing. Greed is good, but in this instance, it's all about you. It's all about and actually collaboration is kind of cheating. So don't do that. Yeah,
Yeah, I
and
don't get it.
then they come through the education system, and one of the most common things you and I hear from the corporates and organizations we work with is these people don't know how to collaborate. You go, well, no
No,
one's taught them.
but it's not that they don't know how to. It wouldn't occur them to collaborate.
No, great point. Yeah,
That's
great
the point.
point.
It wouldn't even cross their mind to go, actually, we're much stronger together. So where do we work? And one of my favorite expressions is covering each other's blind spots. Let's have a team where actually I'm quite good at this, but I'm terrible at that. But you're brilliant at that and quite good at this. So actually, together we sort of cover our blind spots. And to me, that's got to be the answer. Problem solving, challenging kids, making them go a yard further than they went before. Next year, the Sandstone Foundation, we're going to set up a set of Because I Can challenges, and we're going to try. And we're going to talk to young Morgan, who's part of our crew. You've met Morgan, and we're going to try and challenge schools, young people, to set themselves something to do. I don't care what it is, something that stretches themselves just a little bit further to see what it's like to go one step more, to try a little bit harder, and maybe fail initially, but then maybe succeed afterwards, and see where that takes you.
And by the way, you mentioned Morgan, who is an absolute credit to her generation. The ones down from us. One of the things that really fascinates me about that is, as she's come through, because she's now in the workplace, she's come through a really good education system, right? We need to be talking to those young people about what is it you wish we'd done as an education
Absolutely.
system. What are you finding now about the world beyond education, and you think, I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't have that skill set. I wasn't given the opportunity to develop those attitudes and attributes. And actually, by working more with young people, I think one of the really powerful things for me about Sandstone, Tim, and the vision and direction you're going in, is that you're collaborating too. This is about, but we want to hear your voice. For us to be able to develop and deliver the work we need to develop and deliver for you, we need to work with you. And that really excites me.
Yeah, we've had some interesting conversations. Ones that surprised me, where almost kind of, I say me as in our generation, been held accountable, but not for the things I thought I was going to be held accountable for. And essentially, sort of people saying things like, "Well, but you knew we would be isolated. You knew that we would find it difficult to socially interact. Why didn't you sort of tell us that? Why didn't you stop us being our own worst enemies? You've got this experience. You've kind of just let us do what we wanted to do, almost knowing that wasn't going to work. What? So for me, I found that quite fascinating. It's almost 180 degrees, perhaps, from maybe the perception. So yeah, maybe we need to ask.
Yeah, I think, and that is part of the crucial thing about the future development of education. We need to be stopping to we need to stop second guessing what we think young people need and ask them, and particularly those that are fresh out the system and starting to dip their toe and experience the world beyond education. We need to be asking them, what can we help you with? What should we have helped you with? How do we reverse engineer that for future generations? And at the heart of all of that is exactly what you've just said. It's relational stuff. It's around resilience. It's around the ability to know how to collaborate, how to admit without feeling weak or vulnerable or a failure that you've got weaknesses and other people have got strengths. One of
Yeah.
the cause for me about collaborative approaches is we have to have the confidence as individuals to go, I'm so glad I'm working with you because I'm rubbish at that, but you're
Yeah, so it's right,
brilliant at it.
yeah, perfect. And actually, and I think as well, the reality is that's where security comes. That's where security comes from. That knowing somebody's got your back, essentially, and to me, that's where an actual sense of security comes from. And I guess I've been fortunate. The teams I've been involved with, through my career, but the sense of security, the sense of identity comes from belonging, and by belonging, you feel secure.
Yeah.
Um, and actually, I read an article the other day. I think it was the Times, basically saying that the current generation is, without question, the most insecure generation of all time. And I suspect, and when we talk about perhaps more my lane, high pressure situations, and making decisions under pressure, etc., people don't necessarily want the answer. What they want is reassurance and direction. And I wonder whether we're guilty of not providing that reassurance and direction. So creating a lane for young people to operate in, to say, look, I want you to explore. I want you to go left and right, but there's a cliff over here and there's a forest over here. So how about we stay in that lane for a minute? And then whilst you're manoeuvring within the lane, let me provide you with some reassurance and some guidance to find your feet. And whilst you're doing that, which bits are you missing and how can we help? So actually, generations then work together to solve whatever problem that it is that comes next. Whereas my fear is handing out the labels and taking our hands completely off. We're actually not providing reassurance and direction, which ultimately leads to insecurity, which ultimately creates more the problem, exactly the problem that we're looking at. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think you are. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that dependency and compliance culture is where we're struggling. That dependency thing. Oh, somebody else will solve it. And if I give them my problem, they'll deal with it for me. If I have a label that gives me a reason to feel the way I do, make me better, it doesn't give me a strategy. You talked about that really powerfully a few minutes ago. You're not giving me a strategy to understand the power of what my label means, or what I have, or my condition, and how I can use that strength to support my weaknesses, or to find somebody who actually plugs the gap for me. Their strength is where my weakness. We talked before about, Richard Branson, who has dyscalculia and dyslexia, right? His genius is in branding, marketing, all of those sorts of things. He openly will tell you he doesn't understand a spreadsheet because of his labels, which he got later in life. But what he inherently knew was, if I employ the best people in the world at the stuff I'm rubbish at, I'm going to build an unbelievable operation.
Richard, I always joke. My wife can frequently be. I was about to say my wife frequently tells me she hates me, which she does, but that's a completely separate story. But she quite regularly says to me, I hate you. You're good at everything you do, and I say to her, no. I only do the things I'm good at, right? which is fundamentally different, and therefore do my very best to surround myself with people that are much better at the things that I'm not very good at.
Exactly right. And I think that is exactly, but it all comes down to our starting point, which is resilience, which is linked to self-confidence, which is the ability to be curious and the ability to learn. And unless we instill in young people those qualities, all we can ever do is drill them. That's all we can do. We can drill them. We cannot expect them to thrive then when the timetable's gone, the syllabus has disappeared, there's no certain part, the pathway.
Well, they're working from home with no guidance and Again, this is not a chat about geography and whether you should or shouldn't be at home, but you're sat at home on your own with nobody around you to help you or guide you.
But yeah, isn't that interesting? Because one of the things that our generations have instinctively done, particularly coming through that phase of COVID, the increase of working from home, is we have sought out relationships with each other. We've connected, had let's meet, right? So you know what I mean? Let's have a coffee. Let's go and let's meet. Let's spend time talking without necessarily a fixed agenda. Because what we understand instinctively is the more you learn about each other, A, the more you trust one another, but two, you understand each other's nuances, strengths, weaknesses, how you can feed off one. Our friendship has come out of exactly that.
Well, I was going to say, Richard, but that's exactly why we're here.
Yeah.
Because I looked at something, I tried something, I thought I knew how to do it. I still believe what we're doing is the right thing, but I couldn't make it happen. So I sought out somebody that I thought maybe does know how to do it and has got experience of it. And it was like, please give me that guidance. And that's literally how our conversation started. Because it's like, this isn't working for me, but I'm passionate about it. How do I make it work? Let's find somebody that can help me. And that's, to me, that's a strength, not a weakness, surely.
Yeah, absolutely right. And then, of course, you know, I go, oh, got to connect, because I love connecting with people, because then what I find out, the simple truth is, I have learned more from the people I've connected with than ever I've given them. And I mean that all the way back to being an educator, right? When I started teaching in an area of social deprivation, I learned more from the students I taught than ever I taught them. And I think it's that willingness and confidence to be open-ended and interactive.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree, and I know, yeah, which we'll wrap this up in a minute. But just, I'm going to put an appeal out there to anybody listening to this. If you want the foundation to come into a school and run a presentation on resilience, we've got loads of ways of doing it. We use Everest, we use Dakar rallies, we do all sorts of weird and wonderful ways of making it engaging. We're even happy to come and talk to teachers if we need to help them understand some of the toolkits we use around resilience. So please remove the barriers, stop saying no, and find a reason to allow us to come and help you. That's kind of all I'm asking. And I guess for me, having spoken with Richard, and I'm really grateful for his time, we are on the right course. This is important, and it has to happen. So please help us find ways to make this happen, rather than finding excuses as to why it can't. Be a part of the solution. Richard, any kind of final thoughts from you before I wrap this up?
I just want to amplify exactly everything you said. And as a former head teacher, and as somebody whose wife is a current head teacher and whose daughter is a teacher, they would bite your hand off to get you into their school to work with their students, because it has never been more important. And if I was a head teacher now, I'd be bringing you in 5 days a week, all day long, until we actually got this through and into our young people. So please, 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 if you are a school thinking of Sandstone, don't just think, get it sorted, because our young people have never needed that perspective more than they do now.
Richard, that is just brilliant. And as always, I love talking to you. And thank you so much for your time. And you've heard the message, everybody, from Richard and I. And if we lit a bit of a spark talking around education and resilience and why it's important, share this podcast with people, get them to listen. More importantly, both Richard and I are super easy to find on LinkedIn. So get in touch. And if you're at a school that wants to come and see you, the answer is yes. So please just get in touch. Guys, thank you very much for listening. If you have actually been out doing your 5K run during the course of this podcast, then I think we've set a fairly steady pace for you. But thank you very much. And we'll look forward to the next episode.